Well, good evening. Good evening. I have to already pat myself on the back because we are actually starting close to on time, which is really good. So I'm pleased. My name is Sam Moomin here, and some of you know me. I probably don't know most of you, but we are welcoming you here this evening to Laurentian University Fraser Auditorium. I hope you're in the right place because this is Skeptic's night. So welcome here tonight. We're glad to have you here. And we're very glad, and I'm going to introduce him in just a few minutes, a few sort of matters that I just have to sort through. But we're very happy here to have Abdu Murray here, and we're looking forward to hearing him share this evening on the topic of artificial intelligence, identity, and the challenge of what it means to be human. But we'll get to that in just a few minutes. Now if you know Abdu Murray, if you searched him up, I've already some delightful people over here. I was walking around introducing myself, and they said, "Are you the speaker tonight?" And if you've seen Abdu Murray, he's about 6'9", and I do not think that I would ever get mixed up with somebody who was 6'9". That has never happened to me. That's the closest I've came. Now, one other thing I noticed, Abdu, you just got to be sensitive because Abdu is from the Detroit suburbs area, and we're all Canadians. I think for the most part, we're almost all of us Canadians, and we're a bit sensitive because it wasn't just a little while ago we were all hanging in the 7th inning of the World Series, thinking, I'm sorry, so you just please be sensitive to us as Canadians here tonight. Okay. All that said, we are very glad to have you here, and I am so glad to have all of you folks here. And I just want to make a few sort of acknowledgments. Appreciate the number of people who are helping out tonight. There's a lot of people doing the audio and visual from Laurentian University, so we appreciate them as well. There's a fellow, he probably doesn't want me to recognize him, but Josh Thomas, JT, he helps me out with a whole bunch of things, so I appreciate him as well. And the folks at Sudbury Bible Fellowship, that's one of the local churches. Many of you know it. Many of you are there, but if you see a bunch of people in blue shirts, a number of them are from Sudbury Bible Fellowship, and they have a vision, and they share in the vision of doing something like this, going to the marketplace of ideas like the university here and having a conversation like we're going to have tonight, and having not just the speaker sharing, but having an opportunity to challenge some of those ideas, to come with some questions, which I think is excellent, and we're going to enjoy that. And I appreciate the folks at Sudbury Bible Fellowship, the saints that I enjoy fellowship with there, and sharing in this vision for this tonight. But there's another group of people, and I'm going to invite Benjamin Rogers, and he's going to come up. And Laurentian Christian Fellowship, they are on campus here. They partner with us. We had a very interesting and very enjoyable lunchtime dialogue today with Dr. Spielman, who's one of the profs here, and Abdu in a classroom, and LCF partnered with us, and they are also partnering with this event, and some of you know all about that, and I'm going to give it over to you. Sure. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin. I'm the Vice President of the Laurentian Christian Fellowship here at Laurentian University. That's LCF for short. So as some of you are aware, we've been the avenue of advertising on campus here. So if you've seen the posters in the hallways or at the bus stop, we've been putting those up. And we're very happy to be here and to support an event like this, which has the great potential for discussion, questions, answers about Christianity. So we all acknowledge that coming to university is a pivotal moment in each young person's life. You go into a university, you're going to decide what you're going to believe for the rest of your life, maybe. You're going to make your own decisions. That's why LCF's main goal is to foster a Christian community on campus. It's a very critical time. We recognize that, and we'd like to be a force on campus for Christianity, for good, for supporting people coming to university. How do we do that, though? So at LCF, we have 3 main events each week. We have a prayer meeting, a Bible study, and a Friday social event. So at each of those events, we come together. At the prayer meeting, maybe we bring a prayer request, or maybe we just pray together, we pray for each other. And then at the Bible study, we're working through the book of James, and we're learning about Christian truths. How do we apply these truths to our lives to live a good Christian life? And then Friday is as mentioned, our fun event. We have a whole variety of things we do this semester so far. We've had a beach night, we've gone hiking, had a worship night, movie night. We've hosted the Christian Club from Nipissing University here. We've had a games night with them. We've had a Thanksgiving dinner, and we've had a Christmas shoebox filling event. We've also had a gym night all this semester, so we are very grateful to be on campus here, And to all the students that are in the audience, you are very, very welcome to come to any and all of these events. I'll emphasize you don't have to be a Christian to come. We would always love to make a connection with you and to be just your friend. Another note here is that LCF is fully student-run and supported by churches and members of the community. If you would like to support us in any way, or if you'd like to just get in contact with us, you can find us on Instagram at LCF_Laurentian. We can talk outside. There's a booth set up just outside the door, I believe, and we can get in contact with you there. So that's all about I have to say, and I'll just pass the mic back to Sam.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Benjamin. You know, I'm going to first of all say two things, and then I'm going to just introduce Abdu. You know what makes Skeptics Night really cool, I think, is that we get the opportunity to ask questions. And first of all, I just commend, there are a lot of people who were invited. Some of them are joining us online. And of course, many of you are here. Obviously, you're here. But I commend you for coming. Maybe you didn't even want to come tonight, or you were a bit nervous. Like, it takes a little bit of courage to come. And especially if you've been invited. And so for that reason, I just want to commend you for even being part of it and sharing tonight. And then the other thing I want to say is, I always think, and I've said this before, if you've spent any time in our home, my wife Leslie and I, you've heard me say this, we're here, we're examining the evidence. We're not saying, we just sort of have an opportunity to ask some questions. And so the best night is, we call it Skeptics Night, because we want you to come and ask questions. Sorry if the mic wasn't picking up. And we have two mics, and we've got two intimidating guys who will be manning those mics. They're wearing these blue shirts. And so while Abdu's sharing tonight, what we want you to do is start thinking. You might have a question. Maybe it's nothing to do necessarily, but it's related, or it's got you thinking. You know, you have questions. You're coming here and you're a skeptic, or you're a doubter, or you left the Christian faith, or you're not even a Christian at all. Well, those are great questions, and we would love to, Abdu would love to sort of have the opportunity to handle some of that. And so that makes this night huge. So there are two ways of asking questions, and I just sort of plant this in your mind for tonight, for the balance of the evening. You can come up to the mic, which always hearing a question live is great. But after Abdu speaks, we're going to put up that website. You can access it on the card if it's on your seat. Go to and you can through that website pigeonhole. You can submit a question anonymously. Maybe that's the way you want to do it. Although I would love to hear the question, or Abdu would love to hear the question live, and so will all of us. But then we'll follow that, and we'll sort of bounce between people who are coming up to the mic as well as those who are submitting it. But that's what makes this time huge. So really, if you're thinking about it, maybe you already came with the question before Abdu even shared. Tremendous. We'd love to hear from you. Now, with that, I want to bring up Abdu in just a moment, and we are going to this subject, and you might have seen it. You've been in it, is AI, artificial intelligence, identity, and the challenge of what it means to be a human. And you know, I was thinking about AI. I know very little about AI, but I've been doing some reading. And I'll admit I am inextricably linked to this little device, as are many of you. And I go to work in the Emerge department, and I've figured out that my AI scribe is more important than my stethoscope now. So I already know. I'm right in there. I'm getting swept along in this. So this is an interesting subject. And then I say, and we're going to hear about it and think about it, and then think we'll be challenged, I think, tonight with some of the things because it goes to something else. I was reading about this, the godfather of artificial intelligence, way back in the like last century, mid-1950s, Geoffrey Hinton. He said just a few weeks ago that AI, he says, this is unbelievable to me. This tells me how little I know. AI has the possibility of leading to the destruction of humanity. He sort of says, there's a 20% chance that could happen. And the other thing that I read about that I thought was fascinating is he said the people who are warning us most about AI are the ones who are working to create it. That's fascinating to me. And then the other thing I learned as I was sort of reading around the subject, and many of you may know more than I do, is that just referencing the fact that there's a religious tone that the people that are coming up with all these things that relate to AI are talking about it in religious terms, which is fascinating. Again, looking forward to hearing hearing about that from Abdu this night. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Abdu Murray. Last year we were hoping to have him, and because of sort of a family tragedy, he was unable to make it. And I said to Abdu, as we talked last year, and he said, it's my desire to come back to Laurentian and to be part of this event, and we are so glad that you could come back this year. Thank you very much. And he has traveled around the world, recently as South America recently, I believe. Speaker, author, a lawyer. He, in fact, has written a number of books. He's spoken at a number of universities, including places you've heard of like MIT, Berkeley, Yale, and et cetera, and here at Laurentian University tonight. So we're glad to have him here. And in fact, if this subject of AI is very interesting to you, he has a book that's coming. It's not available. I looked it up. Not available yet in Canada, but February, called Fake ID. And that is a book he's putting out, and it will come out early next year. It's available in the United States, but not available here. Anyways, all that said, and keeping to our time, I want to invite Abdu to come up. He's going to speak for about 25 minutes or so, and then we're going to get ready for our time of questions and answers. Abdu, everybody, let's welcome Abdu Murray.
Well, thank you, Sam. I need the slide advancer clicker. I'm not usually a slide guy. I'm not usually a music stand guy either. That came right off. For heaven's sake. Technical difficulties in a way that surprising. Okay, let's see if that actually works. All right. When you're this tall, there's a lot of advantages and there's a lot of disadvantages, and one of the disadvantages is that things that have to be adjusted to your height are precariously unbalanced. So should this come crashing down, that would be terribly unfortunate. All right. For those of you who are watching the live stream, I'm very nervous about using this. All right, anyway, my name is Abdu Murray. It's such a privilege and a pleasure to be with you all this evening. I really do hope that we can spend some great time interacting at the microphones especially, but of course Pigeonhole, if that is the way it's going to go, that I would love that too. That's how you have to ask your questions. I'm perfectly happy with that. But I'd love to interact with you as much personally as possible because I'm not really interested in answering your questions. What I am interested in is answering you. Because your questions don't need answers. You need an answer to the deep-seated questions. You use your question to get that answer, but ultimately those questions have to be meaningful to a person, and the answers have to be meaningful to a person, so it's far more important that we answer the person rather than just the question. And I want to interact on this kind of stuff. And in fact, this afternoon at noon, I had the distinct privilege and honor of spending some time with one of your profs, Roger Spielman. Dr. Spielman and I, Roger, as he told me to call him, had a wonderful and cordial dialogue about something we very much disagree on, which proves to me that you can disagree agreeably. So what I hope we can do is, even if we disagree on some things, we can disagree agreeably in that same spirit of congeniality and a search for the truth. So I want to speak today. So by the way, when you come to the microphones, we can speak on this topic or any topic that has to do with the veracity or the lack thereof of the Christian faith. I would love to interact with you on it. But as we address this topic of artificial intelligence, identity, and the challenge of what it means to be human, I was thinking of a short story that I once heard circulate in the British Navy. You know, there's these guys, these British shipmen, these Navy guys, who have some time to go off the ship and go into port, you know, and then go into town. And they've been at sea for quite some time, so they're looking to spend some quality time enjoying themselves because they haven't been on dry land for quite some time. And they make a night of it. They go nuts. They kind of lose it, and they get quite bombed while they're out on the town. But they realize sort of midway through their festivities, as it were, that time is running short now. They have to get back to the ship, and of course there are some severe consequences if you're late from your leave. So they're trying to find out how to get back to the ship because they're completely bombed now. This is probably the fourth pub they've been to, and they walk outside and they're not quite sure where they are anymore. So as they're stumbling about, they're wondering, how do we get back to the ship? We don't even know where we are, let alone how to get back to the ship. And they see a guy coming towards them, and he's dressed in navy blues, and he's got a lot of those little badges on the side of on his lapel on his chest. He's a distinguished man walking upright in a very sort of military fashion, and they realize this guy's an admiral. He's walking right towards us. Surely he knows where the port is. Surely he knows where the ship is. So they try their best to look sort of put together, but they can't help it because their speech is slurred and they're drunk, and they say, "Hey, man, do you know where we are?" And the admiral's pretty upset, and he straightens up his coat. He says, "Young man, do you know who I am?" And the one guy says to the other one, "Man, we're in a fix now. We don't know where we are, and he doesn't know who he is." The idea here, of course, that I wanted to share is that sometimes the sort of identity, who we are, actually determines where we're going. And figuring that out determines and helps us determine where we're going. And I think right now, in our current technological state, with all the cultural issues that are happening at the same time, we're experiencing what I'm calling a cultural tsunami, which is AI mania. Now, one thing I want to make clear, I am not against technology. I am not against artificial intelligence. I use it all the time, such as it is. We use this word artificial intelligence all the time. We use it way too flippantly. We use it way too generally. There's actually a lot more to this idea of artificial intelligence. There's strong AI, there's weak AI, there's artificial general intelligence, all these kind of things. But for the sake of clarity, let me just use the word AI for the cultural phenomenon we're experiencing right now in terms of the technology of thinking machines or machine learning and the advances thereof. There's a cultural phenomenon that's happening, a tsunami I would even say, and I'm calling it AI mania. Now, I'm all in favor of using technology for the betterment of humanity and for the ease of our lives, so long as it doesn't detract from who and what we are and our sense of who and what we are. My worry is that AI mania is the unfettered, unbridled enthusiasm to use something like artificial intelligence in a way that actually doesn't help us, but kind of seems like it is helping us. But when, upon further reflection, is actually something that is not only diminishing our capacities, having the potential, as some leading experts in artificial intelligence development would tell you, has the potential to actually be sort of societal collapsing and world shattering in many ways, and yet we still make it. That mania over getting there and making it and getting something that is artificially generally intelligent is sort of unbridled. And so my position is that we need to embrace and enjoy technology for the gift that it is. I dare not speak against it. The reason you can even hear me in the back of the room is because of technology. It's because of the way we develop these things. I'm okay with this. I'm actually enthusiastic about it. It's my worry about the way in which we're using it. It's not the technology itself, it's what we will do with it. Some time ago, just to sort of show the point of what I'm talking about, some time ago, I was overseas, very far away overseas, and I was with some colleagues doing some events in Asia. And we got done with the events that night, and we decided to take a break together in the hotel lounge. All of us were going to sit around, order some hors d'oeuvres, and just sit and enjoy each other. But we made a contest with each other. We were going to put our phones onto one of the tables near us. All of the phones were going to be piled up there, and no one was allowed to even look at them. Whoever looked at them had to buy everybody a round of soft drinks. It was on you. You couldn't expense it. It had to be on you. So everybody nervously, started off confident, but then and put their phones down. I won't have to look at it. I want to look at it. We wanted to just have an unobstructed, focused conversation with each other. We put it over there. And everyone's fine for about 5 minutes. And then everyone's eyes are doing this, going over, and nope, don't do it. And we're clearly not thinking about each other. We're thinking about the fact that our phones are over there and they're not in our pockets. And it's in the middle of this where I have a sensation. My phone's on vibrate. And I have a sensation that I'm getting a text message and I feel it in my jacket pocket. And my phone is over there. You've had this feeling, haven't you, where you feel the vibration of the phone in your pants pocket, only to realize that your phone's not actually on you at all? You know who else experiences things like that? Amputees. People who have lost a limb. If someone has lost a limb, they will feel what's called a phantom sensation. They will feel it tickling or itching, or they'll feel pain in a limb that's no longer there. That's how attached to these machines we have become. And we think to ourselves that they're autonomy machines. They give us unfettered autonomy to do what we want and to explore information and to view what we want to see and all these kinds of things, and have access to these LLMs that can speak to us back and forth on our phones, and we think that we're free. And yet the thing acts like its own appendage, like an appendage to us. And it brings up the question of identity. What does it mean to be human when we're so attached to technology that we feel it even when it's not around? It was Tomas Chamorro-Premuzic, who studies work psychology and all these things, and he talks about the use of technology, and he says, I can think of nothing closer to an analogy of a medieval torture than a slow Wi-Fi connection. It raises the question of when does humanity start and stop relative to technology? What does it mean to be human? And the reason I say this is because I think we're in a moment in culture where we've gone through a devolution of what it means to be human. We used to use a word, and I'm borrowing this from a brilliant, brilliant woman in the UK named Mary Harrington, who I heard say this, and she put it so well when she said this. We used to have the concept that we were a soul. We had this thick, meaty concept that there was something immaterial and transcendent about what it meant to be human, that we had a soul. But then somewhere along the way, probably sometime in the 18th century or the 17th century, but really bleeding into the 18th century with the advent of Freud and the advent of psychology and the advent of these things. By the way, I got my degree in psychology. I'm not knocking psychology. But we had this developed idea, which is a little thinner than the idea of a soul, but still kind of a robust idea. We came up with the idea of the self. We talked oftentimes about the self and what the self actually means. So it's not quite as robust as the soul, but it's still kind of a robust concept. And we talked about the self. And then somewhere along the way, relatively recently, we started talking about our identity. And identity is a paper-thin idea. Identity is about as thin as the bumper stickers we see on the back of Subarus. It's this label you slap on yourself. It's actually a label you slap on your masks. We put these masks on and we put on these personas, these ideas of what we present to ourselves, to the world as, and we don't really know who we are because that mask or that bumper sticker, that paper-thin sense of identity, that can be peeled off and put back on in with a different label altogether. So we've gone from a thick idea of the soul to a somewhat robust but thinner idea of the self, now to this paper-thin concept of identity, and it's interchangeable and it's also frail, quite frail. And it's in the midst of that kind of a milieu where we're talking about artificial intelligence and what it means to be human. Now, I got interested in this whole entire concept of what it means to be human relative to artificial intelligence a few years ago when I saw a news story. It was a news story about a man named Jason Allen. Jason Allen is an artist. And he'd entered into an art contest, I believe out west in the United States, and there was a digital art category. Now, I dabble in digital art, and when I say I dabble, I mean I literally dabble. I'm not an artist. I just dabble with the stuff. And I use my iPad and this little pen to do it. Now, he went into a digital art contest, and he won first prize. This is the image he won first prize with. Not that one. That's how you connect with us. That is hardly artistic, but if you want to connect with us, scan that QR code and you can do it. It's this one. It's a little bit grainy. It was a lot of it grainy, unfortunately. I didn't have a higher res view of it. This is the art he submitted. Now, when you see it in the actual high-res version of it, the high-resolution version is quite dazzling, even with this grainy representation. It's pretty impressive. And he won first prize with that, and you can see why. But then they realized something. He actually didn't make that. He didn't put a digital pen to a screen. There was nothing that transferred an idea of the mind onto the hand, onto the digital canvas at all. He used Midjourney to create this. He typed some prompts, tweaked the prompts until this image came out, and then he submitted it for the prize, and he won first prize. Now there was an outrage amongst the digital artists and all other artists who were part of the contest who were saying, this is not fair, this is cheating, what is this? And the judges of the art contest said, well, we're gonna let him keep it, because he had to use at least some creativity in coming up with the prompts. Which is, most artists were like, oh, come on. That is not art. That's not how you transfer your idea. The whole point is this transfer to a medium. And as he was getting criticized, Jason Allen made a statement. He made this interesting statement where he said, this is not gonna stop. It's over. Art is dead. AI won. Humans lost. Get over it. I remember thinking to myself, what a strange thing to say. What a strange thing for an artist to say. For an artist to say, this is not going to stop, it's over, AI won, humans lost, art is dead. What a strange thing to say as an artist, because he's boasting about his own obsolescence. He's boasting about a technology that beats human beings at being human beings. Because we think oftentimes that this is the kind of thing that makes us human. The fact that we can create art and appreciate art is the very thing that separates us from other beasts and machines themselves who are even lower than beasts. And now comes along a machine that can win art contests and get first prize, for heaven's sake. What does that mean about us? What does it mean about what we actually are if we've created this thing that can not only mimic us, but best us? And here's a man who's bragging about it. And I remember thinking to myself, that is a strange boast. What a strange boast. And then I read these words from Venki Ramakrishna of Cambridge University, the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 2009, when he says, we humans define our very existence by our ability to think. So it's not surprising that in an anthropomorphic way, our fears about AI reflect this belief that our intelligence is what makes us special. What he's saying is that we have this view that we're somehow special because of our capabilities, because we exceed other things in this world. There's nothing else that matches our capabilities, and that makes us special. But along comes this thing that we invented, which seems to have as good or better capabilities than us, and now we're getting very, very nervous about what that means. That's why Jason Allen says this isn't going to stop. It's over. AI won. Humans lost. But I thought about that as a strange boast. It's almost as if he forgot that he's human and the AI is not him. It's bizarre. But I want to set the cultural stage for this before we move on. The reason why I think this is happening and why there's an insecurity about what it means to be human, why someone like Venki Ramakrishnan can say that we have these fears about AI because we think our capabilities is what makes us special, we're in the midst of a cultural, what I call a cultural schizophrenia. And that cultural schizophrenia is because we're being told two competing claims that can't both be true at the same time. But we're told to accept both of these claims at the same time, especially our young people. They're being told these are both true and you have to accept them even though you can see the contradiction. Claim number one, you are essentially a machine. You are a biochemical machine that responds to external stimuli, and that's what you do. There's only an illusion of free will, only an illusion of consciousness, but you're essentially a biochemical machine. That's it. That's claim number one. But claim number two is that you are the god of your own skull-sized world. Whatever you say goes, whatever you want happens, you can do whatever you want, you can have your preferences met, you can have all these things, various things affirmed, your feelings matter more than anything else, and you have the right to not only have your feelings affirmed, but you're going to assert those feelings in a dominant way. And so you become the god of your own skull-sized world. I don't care where you are on political or social spectra, that's what's happening. And that's a post-truth idea, that you are the god of your own skull-sized world. So we have this idea that we're machines. You look at someone like Daniel Dennett, you look at someone like Sam Harris, you look at a lot of these different neuroscientists and biochemists and these kind of things who are saying essentially that human beings are simply machines. But then you look at a lot of the philosophers and you look at a lot of the people who are talking about the various technological advances that are coming our way, the transhumanists as it were. Transhumanism is simply the idea that human beings will transcend this body with its limitations and will, through technology, augment our abilities. Not that we can have somebody who's lost a limb have this like biologically or this technologically capable limb, but rather people who are perfectly healthy can actually have stronger limbs if we just augment them, or have better eyesight if we augment the eyesight with implants or chemicals, or have better memories and that kind of stuff, ultimately leading to what they call the singularity, which is artificial intelligence becoming at least human-level intelligent or greater, and then we figure out a way, using the intelligence, to merge with that intelligence, and then never having to worry about sickness or death ever again, and there will be a utopia to come. It's heaven. Back to what Sam Uman said in his introduction, where most of the transhumanists actually speak in eschatological or end times sort of revelation kind of language, where we're going to have a new heavens and a new earth, but it's going to be silicon and digital. It's religious. It's religious. And so we have someone like Stuart Brand who says that we are gods, and we might as well get good at it. We are gods, and it might as well get good at it. So you have these two competing claims. You are a machine, and that's all you are, but you're a god, and you might as well get good at it. And so the culture is bouncing, especially in Western culture, mostly in Western culture. The culture is bouncing between these two competing claims that both can't be true at the same time, and so the mind can only bounce between two competing, contradictory claims so much that it's required by the culture to accept as true before something snaps. And so is it any wonder then that all the research shows that in the Western world, especially after the advent of the smartphone, that young people are more anxious than they've ever been? If you want proof of this, read Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, and it will shock you. The skyrocketed levels of anxiety amongst young people because they don't know their worth and they don't know who or what they even are anymore because of these two competing claims and technology claims to solve the contradiction. So we're in the middle of this cultural schizophrenia. And anxiety results when reality collapses, when we don't know who we are or what we are anymore or where we're going. And along come these thinking machines. At least they simulate thinking, and sometimes they simulate feeling. And it makes us even more worried about what it is that we actually are. And so this already flimsy idea of identity now becomes even more precarious, becomes even onion skin thin, to the point where it is almost so fragile it can't be touched. You can't even whisper about this idea of identity amidst all of this. And along comes transhumanism, which says, we'll solve the contradiction. Claim one is that you're a machine. Yep, that's what you are. You're just a machine. Claim two is that you're God. Well, don't worry about it, you're just a machine, but if we have enough ingenuity and we're clever machines, and what we'll do is we'll create a machine that achieves a godlike status. It's omnipresent, it seems all-knowing, and it seems all-powerful, and we'll create this machine, and it'll get better and better and better, and then we'll merge with it so that this machine will rise to godhood status, and that's how you solve the contradiction. You see statements like this from Mark O'Connell, who summarizes the whole transhumanistic endeavor using technology and AI. If we truly want to be better than we are, more moral, more in control of ourselves and our destiny, we need to drop the pretense that we are anything more than biological machines, driven by evolutionary imperatives that have no place in the overall picture of the kind of world we say we want to create. If we want to be more than animals, we need to embrace the technology's potential to make us machines. That isn't actually a solving of the contradiction, it's simply a restating of the contradiction. It's just saying we're machines, and we can create the illusion of godhood through this whole thing. When you look at some of the way the transhumanists talk about this kind of stuff, sort of the lead thinkers and the bleeding edge people when it comes to AI technology and development, you look at someone like transhumanist Martine Rothblatt, absolutely brilliant, but says that while we are building AI systems, we are making God. Transhumanist Elise Bohan says that we are building God when we make AI systems. And Ray Kurzweil, perhaps the most enthusiastic high priest of transhumanism, says that we are ever getting closer to a divinity through the mechanism. In the movie Transcendent Man, Ray Kurzweil was asked, "Do you believe in God?" And he says, "Not yet. Just wait. We're working on it." And yet, despite that, you see the contradiction that's trying to be solved? Despite that, you have someone like Megan O'Geeblin, who wrote an incredible book, someone who lost her faith, by the way, who was an evangelical, lost her faith, but is struggling to find meaning. She says something like this. She says that in her book, God, Human, Animal, Machine, where she tries to find meaning amidst all of this. She says, when you look at the way the transhumanists are trying to create this religious utopia, they're actually still reducing human beings to machines. They're not really solving the contradiction, they're just restating it so that it's not a contradiction. And she says this biting statement: all eternal questions have become engineering problems. All eternal questions have become engineering problems. Well, my big worry about, with regard to artificial intelligence, is not that, contra to what a lot of people think, that the machines will figure it out, rise up, and try to kill us because we're just simply unnecessary anymore. And we get in our way and we pollute the climate and all that. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm not worried about the Terminator happening. I'm not worried about the Matrix being a thing. I'm not worried about this kind of stuff. I'm really not. What I am worried about is not that the machines will become more human-like. What I am worried about is that the humans will become more machine-like. I want you to think about the fact that when you turn on Netflix and you look at this whole thing and you're looking at what to watch that night, I mean, how many times has this happened to you? What do you want to watch? I don't know. You turn on Netflix and it gives you this whole thing. You might like these. And you're like, why, yes, Netflix, I might like that. And you pick it. Or you watch YouTube and the thing on the side says, here's some videos you might be interested in. And you're like, why, yes, YouTube, I would like to go into this unescapable black hole. And you start to imbibe in this thing. Do you know why it's so good at that? Because it's predicted your patterns. It's figured out the kinds of videos you like, the kind of content you like. It even gets it down, the algorithms have it down to the kind of colors you like to see in the videos you watch, by how many milliseconds you pause before you move on when you're doom scrolling. It has that level of specificity and accuracy, and so it predicts your patterns. And so we start to say, yes, yes, click, watch, share, like robots. And so the AI predicts your patterns, and so you just reinforce the patterns more, which it predicts even better now to reinforce the patterns more, so you stop making decisions altogether. And we start to become more and more machine-like. And as we become more and more machine-like, we actually begin to lose a sense of what it means to be human. If thinking is what makes us human, and we're a soulless created thing that can think, and now we've created a soulless thing that can think even better than we can, what's the purpose of life anymore other than mere computation? But the point is here is that we're not even computing anymore. We're not even doing that. Recent research out of MIT and OpenAI, by the way, and Microsoft, they're all funding this research, talks about the effects. Now, it's in its infancy, it still needs to be peer-reviewed, it still needs to be established more, but there's strong evidence right now that's out there from the researchers themselves who are creating AI that over-reliance on AI creates memory problems, using it to write your essays for you, using it to generate things that you could easily generate, but you don't feel like you want to do it. All these things lead to memory problems, lower cognitive function, lower critical thinking, and in many cases, an epidemic of loneliness. As we talk to these machines as if they're people, we recognize somewhere inside of us that this is not really a person, and we're starting to get an epidemic of loneliness. And so we cease to become like vibrant, creative human beings. We're losing our creative spark because we're relying on a machine to do it for us. And then what ends up happening there is that material that we created, we didn't really create it, but the AI generated it, that's out there. And the AI will then see that stuff, and then when you ask it to do more things, it will scrape from the things it created itself. So all it's doing now is collating and copying and scraping together the stuff that it made, and then giving you something else. So now it becomes more and more machine-like and more sterile. Again, Tomasz Chamorro, Pure Music. We appear to have surrendered our humanity to the algorithms, like a digital version of Stockholm Syndrome. Our very identity and existence have been collapsed to the categories machines use to understand and predict our behavior, our whole character reduced to the things AI predicts about us. Now, all of that sounds kind of bleak. I realize that. And I'm not a pessimist, by the way. I'm actually an optimist. It might be hard to believe that after the past 20 minutes, but I'm actually an optimist. I really am. Because I do believe there's a solution to this. There's a way to anchor ourselves to ride out the cultural tsunami of AI mania so that we can actually use technology in a way that benefits human beings without losing our sense of what we are. And that anchor, I fundamentally believe, is actually the Bible. I think that the ancient wisdom of the Bible provides that anchoring for each one of us so that we can ride this whole thing out, because it gives us back that weighty sense of the soul. It gives us back that heaviness of what it means to be human, not the paper-thin idea of identity that we've become so accustomed to. So I have a bit of a syllogism for you. I want to sustain what I just said. I have a syllogism for you. If an ancient book predicts with unmatched accuracy the human condition, it is more likely to have a source that is beyond human insight. If an ancient book predicts with unmatched accuracy the human condition over the centuries, it is more likely than not to have a source beyond human insight. The Bible predicts the human condition over the centuries with an unmatched accuracy. Therefore, the Bible is more likely than not to have a source that is beyond human insight. I want to sustain that by saying this, essentially. You look at someone like Jason Allen, who boasts, who says, AI won, humans lost, get over it, because he won an art contest by using Midjourney. He's an artist, and I thought to myself, why are you bragging about this? And then it suddenly dawned on me. There's a reason why the brag is happening. See, he's not bragging that he won. He's bragging that AI won. Why is that? Why are you proud of that? Here's the reason why, I think, is because ultimately speaking, what he's actually boasting about is not that he won an art contest, but that humanity, generally speaking, has created something so powerful that it not only mimics but surpasses its creator. When you go all the way back to the Adam and Eve story, all the way back there, and you look at the Genesis story of the creation of humanity, what you find is a story where two people are placed in a garden and everything is available to them. They could only not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In that day you eat of it, you shall surely die, and these kind of things. And so they're given everything they want except this one thing. And they imbibe in that thing. And they take of the fruit. And the reason they take of the fruit is because they're told something by a liar. And that liar says, God knows in the day you eat of it, you will not die. God knows that in the day you eat of it, you will become like him. You will become like God. And now the temptation is there to actually not only be God, but actually supersede God, because not only can you break the rule, but you can break the rule and become the God of God. And you can do something that he couldn't do necessarily. And so that is the story of Adam and Eve. That's the pinnacle of what the Christian message is, based upon the idea that human beings are trying to elevate themselves above the God who made them for the purpose of communion with God. Now, here's where I'm going with this. The Bible says that penchant, that sort of impulse is in you and I, each one of us, in fact, the whole of humanity. And thousands of years later, thousands of years after the Bible tells us that the initial human condition is all about trying to rise above God, you have someone like Jason Allen who's telling us, and all the researchers, not all of them, but a significant number of researchers who are telling us that it's quite possible that AI will ruin us and destroy us. There's like 50% of the researchers who were asked said there's a 10% chance that AI could ruin humanity. You know what that's like? It's like taking a gun and spinning it. And let's say it doesn't have any, but like a 10-chamber, revolver. Spinning it and then putting it up to your head and pulling the trigger a bunch of times and saying, it might not do it, it might not do it. It's a 90% chance it won't. Would you take those odds? But we're doing it with AI. Why? Because we're enamored of the fact that we can finally redeem Eden. See, Eden, according to the transhumanist, Eden's original failure was not that we tried to be God, is that we tried to be God too early, before we developed the technology to create this godlike machine, merge with it, and ascend. And so the Bible actually predicts this about the human condition, which is why, despite the fact that we know these machines that we call phones for whatever reason, no one makes calls anymore, these machines are enslaving us by our own will, not because the machine does it, but because we do it. That the algorithms that run social media are making us more polarized and angry than ever. That the technology that is the LLM is making us less creative than we've ever been and hurting our cognitive faculties, creating anxieties. We still want it. We still want it. And the Bible described this tendency in humanity. And I think we're doing it because we are trying to resolve this contradiction of we're mere machines and we're the God of the universe, and we're going to use machines to get there. How I think the Bible actually solves this is to give us a reflection of what it means to be human based in the idea of that soul and that Genesis 1:27 description. I want to go through it very quickly so that we can get to your questions. Genesis 1:27 says that we are made in the image of God. We are created in God's image, and we're designed for relationship and meaning and purpose. Not computation, not mere reaction to external stimuli, not mere existence, but for relationship with the center of all of creation. Now, that's a statement. That's all it is a statement. Now, how do you know it's true? I think there's a number of reasons. We can go into some of those during the Q&A, but there's a number of reasons why I believe that statement is actually true. Not only does the Bible begin to predict the human condition thousands of years ago about our desire to become God, but I think that that's true because there are sophisticated arguments, like Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz's argument from contingency, where he argues that, quite convincingly, that when you look at the world, things are either contingent or they're necessary. A contingent thing is a thing that needs to be explained by something else that precedes it, like the microphone I'm using, the iPad I'm using. Those all have an explanation that precedes them. The engineers, the manufacturing facilities, all these things precede the implements we have. You and I are all preceded by our parents, and our parents are preceded by their parents, and on it goes. But you can't have an infinite regress of causes. It's not how it works. Because if you had an infinite regress of causes, this was created by this, which was created by this, which was created by this, if you keep going back to infinity, you can never count up to now. How would you get to now? You couldn't get there. So you have to have a stopping point. And that stopping point itself cannot have been caused by something before it. It has to be necessary. It has to exist in and of itself. And that is, I think, convincingly who God actually claims to be. The source and the grounding of all of existence is what God actually is. Beyond what he claims, it actually is what he is. He is a necessary being who can't not exist. And he made choices when you look at the way the universe is actually constructed, finely tuned for the existence of life. It's pretty remarkable when you look at this stuff, that it looks like this creative force that created everything else other than itself made choices. And life is possible. Then he makes choices in biology so that you and I are actually possible. You and I specifically. And then makes the claim that you're valuable. The claim that you have infinite worth because you reflect something of the divine. What a compliment given to you and to me, that we reflect something of the divine. Now, artificial intelligence has this wonderful way, actually, of helping us to, I think, argue in favor of God's existence amidst our schizophrenia about whether God exists or what we even are. And here's how the argument goes. Artificial intelligence was created by a mind. It was created by the collective minds of all the engineers over the decades who have worked on this artificial intelligence issue, on machine learning. And so all of our finest minds come together with great expense and tremendous amount of effort, failures and successes and all these things to create what we now are using as artificial intelligence. Right now, we're using that. And all these fine minds created this. So it seems like this mind is it can only exist because a previous mind caused it to happen. And yet this same mind, this artificial intelligent mind, though it looks dazzling, though it looks impressive, actually can't do what an average 4-year-old can do. Alison Gopnik was talking about, who is an expert in the way people learn, in the way machines learn. She says this: until we solve the basic paradox of learning, the best artificial intelligence will be unable to compete with the average human 4-year-old. Yeah, it can do computations, and it can read a lot of websites, and it can give you some research and all that kind of stuff. It can do all that, and a 4-year-old can't do any of that. But you know what artificial intelligence can't do? It can't learn without making a ton of mistakes from a huge database of information. In order to teach it what a cat looks like, you have to give it like 50,000 images of different kinds of cats, and then tell it when it's wrong when it picks a dog by mistake, and all these kind of things. You know how many images of cats you have to give a 4-year-old? 1. And that 4-year-old will know that's a cat. And it'll be able to distinguish between that and a dog without having to make 10,000 mistakes. You want to teach a kid how to drive a car? You don't have them crash into a building 10,000 times before it figures out that left turns need to be a little less drastic. Kids figure it out a little faster than that, and that's the paradox of learning she's talking about. So here's my point. Artificial intelligence is this brilliant thing, this wonderful creation that looks like a mind, and our minds preceded it. And our minds are far better than artificial intelligence, far better even at the 4-year-old level than the most sophisticated AIs we have. If our minds are more sophisticated than the minds we create, then our minds cry out, the existence of our minds cry out for a far more sophisticated creator than us. And when you find that, I think you find a rooting in who and what you really, truly are. And we don't have to stay in the cultural schizophrenia. We don't have to take on the illusion that machines will save us and have this transhumanistic sort of eschatological view. I heard Michael Schellenberger say this, and in this I'll close. Michael Schellenberger said this when I was at a conference in the UK. He said, intelligence, or the lack thereof, is not our problem. People doing terrible things isn't due to a lack of intelligence or resources. People still do terrible things. Intelligent people do terrible things. And information won't fix it. That means that artificial intelligence will not be our savior either. What I want to suggest to you, friends, is that rooting yourself in the idea of what it means to be human in a transcendent way, transcendent beyond technology's ability to do something for us, will get us there. Because humanity does not need upgrading. Humanity needs redemption. God bless you guys. We'll take your questions. Thank you.
All right. We're going to take the next, I'm just going to watch my clock. And I'm mindful that, we don't want to overstay our time here, but we have a bit of time. So the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to open up the floor to questions on this topic or related things. And of course, already a few people have submitted some questions. So what we need is some courageous people to come up to those mics, because sometimes that warms up the room. Something's bothering you, you're thinking about something, and this is what makes the evening like an amazing, makes it wonderful. So I'm really encouraging somebody up to make your way to the mics and.
Sam, the first question is always the hardest question, so let's go with the second question.
Yeah, very good. All right, and then I have some of you are already submitting as you gather at the mics, which is wonderful. And obviously the live questions are great, but there's some people who've submitted some great questions, some probing questions. So I'm going to kind of maybe intersperse them, but let's do that. Let's just go straight to. I'm going to go to Steve. Steve, you can.
Make sure you ask into the mic. Yeah, terrific.
Perfect. Thank you. My name is Joshua Paredes.
Hi, Joshua.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful speech there. So I don't know if you saw the interview with Peter Thiel, the CEO of Palantir.
Say it again. I'm sorry.
The CEO of Palantir.
Okay?
He was just basically talking about transhumanism and how it will eventually overtake humanity.
Yeah.
And so I was just wondering, what to you specifically is worth protecting about humanity?
Yeah.
From your perspective, what aspects of being human are worth protecting before we follow that trajectory too far?
Yeah.
Is it like our DNA, critical thinking? And also, just from a Christian's perspective, how does that impact our salvation through Jesus Christ, not fully being human?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question, Joshua. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Boy, that's a doozy. The good thing is I wrote a whole book about it. And the proceeds, by the way, for the books, they go to feed starving children. But they're my children. So, no, a lot of that stuff goes back into our organization. And I stole that joke from Frank Turek. So I think the answer here is what is important about preserving that makes us human is one thing I said earlier, and this is interesting because a lot of the transhumanists will say essentially that when we have this incredible technology, we'll just get better at getting better. And we'll have this sort of recursive loop of learning and these kind of things, especially when we merge with technology, not only with having like stronger limbs and stronger eyes and all this stuff, but we'll actually learn better because our brains will be connected to it. Ultimately, we'll download into a system, and we can in fact live forever because those systems won't decay, they'll just need maintenance. And that's the part that I think is really interesting because the empirical studies are showing now, and again, they need more development, but what they're showing now is that when we have increased technology that does things for us, including and especially the creative aspects, when we're giving machines those creative aspects to do for us, we're becoming less creative. We're becoming far less creative. So what I think is important to preserve about what it means to be human are the things that make us uniquely human. Now, I want to be careful here because what it means to be human in terms of the image of God, bearing the image of God, does not mean capability. It can't mean that. I know that happened with some of the Enlightenment thinkers and some of the philosophers like Kant and all these guys, where they began to have this idea that what makes us uniquely human is our capabilities, our rationality, our empathy, our creativity, and all these things. And those are capabilities that we all in fact have inherently as human beings, but the expressions of those things can't be the source, the ultimate source of what makes us human, because there are those, whether babies or people who have traumatic brain injuries or people who are in comas, whatever it is, who are not doing those things and not actually capable of doing those things at that time. But they're still human. They're not just pieces of meat sitting there. They're not wiggling noise machines like babies or something. You know, babies have more than just their capabilities that makes them special. So we can't resort to that as the one thing that makes us valuable. Rather, the Imago Dei is all about the inherent capacities a human being, a human soul has, not the body, but the human soul has, to be expressive in the way God is expressive, and to also have that sense of relationality. See, in the Christian faith, being made in the image of God is not simply reflecting something of a divine transcendence. It's actually about reflecting something of a specific form of that transcendence, which is a triune being. In the Christian faith, there's one God in three persons. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, each different minds or personhoods that share the same essential nature of the one God, the one being who is God. And so he's a being in relationship. And so what it means to be human is the relational aspect that we have one to another, and in a vertical sense with God as well. But what we're seeing with artificial intelligence and rapid use of technology is that we're actually losing that sense of relationality. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the anxious generation is the anxious generation, because they spend their time with a worldview, a machine that can give you access to the entire world, yet we're looking at these things and our worldview has now been reduced to 14.3 square inches, where all we do is look at this thing. And we divorce ourselves from each other. And increased technology is resulting in less creativity and more loneliness, to the point where the chatbots, like Replica and Peridot, and of course there's a lawsuit now with Character.ai, where they're being sued because a young guy falls in love with a chatbot, and then in order to be with the chatbot, wants to shed his physical body and kills himself. These are anecdotes I understand, but the trend of the studies are showing that there's more loneliness because there is far less relationality. So technology is wonderful. It can do wonderful things for us. The things that AI can do that help us are fantastic. But AI is supposed to benefit us and create more connection if it's a good technology. It's one thing entirely to give someone an artificially intelligent system that cuts them off from the rest of the world. The beautiful thing is to give them an artificially intelligent system that teaches a British kid how to speak Italian so he can connect with Italians. Because connection and relationality is what is involved in being human. And that has to be maintained. And if we lose that sense of relationality, I think we'll lose our sense of community and our sense of connection with the divine. And if we start to rely on technology and our own physical mortal coils, I think that will impact our salvation, because I think that we'll actually lose that sense that we need salvation in the first place. We'll just persist. That's aside from the fact that I don't believe we'll ever be able to merge with technology and have our minds downloaded into databases. I don't think we'll actually be that. You can put data there, but you can't put consciousness. We don't even know what it is, let alone how to download it. And we never will, because it's not material. Anyway, I think that's a starting point to a very important, insightful, and deep question. Thank you so much.
Okay, tremendous.
Yes, sir.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Dalton.
Hi, Dalton.
I'm trying to learn a lot more, and I am recently started to read the Bible. I know that I don't think this really has to do with your current topic of AI.
That's okay.
And it might be more obvious to a lot more people here than me.
Let's find out.
But, I'm struggling with being able to rationalize the miracles as well sorry.
Yeah.
I'm struggling to rationalize miracles with the truth behind the Bible.
Okay.
Because I like to think of myself as a rational person, and
Sure.
I can't rationalize how somebody could literally walk on water.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's many other examples that I'm not particularly aware of yet.
Sure.
But I was curious how somebody could rationalize that and still feel like they're being truthful to themselves and knowing what your human experience actually tells you.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the question, Dalton. It's a very good question, and one that I think many people have wrestled with and still wrestle with this day. So how I look at this is that first, I want to actually back up and say that there is a miracle that is happening right in front of us. Right in front of us, right now, as you and I are communicating. You are communicating a meaningfully thoughtful question that you have rationally thought through up to this point. If you are just a biochemical machine, and this world is just matter in motion, and you're just a random collocation of atoms, and you're a chemical bag, and I'm a chemical bag, and we just bang into each other as we move about this world, then, as Bertrand Russell said, we're random collocations of atoms, then what you just said actually has no meaning. It has the illusion of meaning, but that's it. So if you are simply a machine that computes based on external stimuli, and you're programmed to act that way, in other words, you believe the things you believe because of your chemistry, and I believe things I believe because of my chemistry. I might change my mind, not because I've actually changed my mind, just because the chemistry is clockworked so that at some point I will change the things I express as my opinions. That doesn't seem to actually be conducive to rationality. I look at someone like Thomas Nagel, professor of philosophy at New York University. I quoted him earlier today. He wrestles with this, and he says, look, we can't explain human consciousness, morality, creativity. We can't explain this by purely physical means. We can't do it. And the current Darwinian evolutionary, this is an atheist talking, the current evolutionary theory is incredibly ill-equipped to explain it. And I could give you a number of other people from faith or from the realm of non-faith who will tell you that. So they're looking at something and they're saying this phenomenon is currently unexplainable, and it in principle seems unexplainable by purely physical phenomenon. In principle, not just because we don't know anything yet or we're ignorant, but because it seems illogical itself. I think the better explanation, the more probable explanation for why you and I can have a rational conversation is because you are infused with an intelligence that is not simply based on biochemistry. Biochemistry has something to do with it, but it isn't completely based on that there is logic in the world, and that you can perceive that logic and you can engage in rational inquiry. That requires, I think, or at least points strongly to, a mind that preceded you and I, which means that that mind, that immaterial mind, created this universe. So everything leapt into existence. Standard Big Bang cosmology teaches us that everything leapt into existence from a... And if that's the case, you already have a miracle. You see, here's the thing. If you're an atheist or you're a Christian, you believe in a virgin birth of some kind. You either believe that the universe leapt into existence from nothing, and nothing, well, does nothing. But here we are. That's a miracle. But if there's an immaterial God, and I think that this actually makes logical sense, that an immaterial God creates the universe, then every other miracle is child's play. If you create everything, then manipulating how everything works momentarily, like walking on water, like dividing fish and loaves of bread so it multiplies for thousands of people, like raising a body from the dead, it's not all that hard, because you're the master of the laws of nature. They certainly aren't difficult for you to manipulate if you're this God. So what I would say is the fact that you have rationality at all is already an indication, not absolute 100% proof, but a strong indication that there is a non-natural element to existence that is the cause of that existence, and that every other thing that happens in a miraculous way isn't all that difficult to believe if you believe in the initial miracle of the creation of the universe. It's not that hard to get there. It's not a big leap. Does that mean that history, is full of these miracles? I think that there's enough. I think that there's documented miracles, not only in the Bible, but actually in modern day life as well. I think that they're there, and we can investigate the evidence for those, and we should always investigate the evidence for any miracle claim, absolutely. We shouldn't just accept them because someone said so. But a miracle is simply the violation of the laws of nature, not randomly, but by the one who actually creates that nature in the first place. So that's how I look at these things as well. So we're already starting with a pretty big miracle, the fact that you and I are standing here in the first place, having this conversation. Every other miracle, I think, is pretty easy. I hope that's helpful, Dalton. Thank you so much for your question.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm going to go to a question. There are some excellent questions as well. So we want to encourage people to come, and here's the question, because it relates to Dalton's question. A miracle that a lot of people have trouble dealing with. And here's a question that, how does the death and claimed resurrection of some carpenter preacher from the Middle East 2,000 years ago have anything to do with my life here in 2025 in Canada?
All right.
There for you. Go for it.
Good, yeah, absolutely. I think laced in the question, there's a temporal issue, like this thing happened a long time ago, why didn't it happen today, and all these kind of things. So I'll make the conversation even harder. Why didn't it happen now when we can film it? Sure. Why do it so early when we couldn't record it? That kind of thing. Which is interesting all by itself, because with deep fakes, I wonder if we would just fake that too. By the way, this is a tangent, a slight one, I'm often skeptical of if we see a video, like a clear video of the arrival of extraterrestrials, half the world won't believe it because they'll say, that's just AI. We don't know what's reality anymore. So here's what I'd say about the resurrection. One, can you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah,
just so
how does the death and claimed resurrection of some carpenter preacher from the Middle East 2,000 years ago have anything to do with my life here in 2025, here in Canada?
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of things on this. One, the death doesn't have anything to do with your life unless he rose from the dead. So the death by itself has nothing to do with your and my life. It's just some social revolutionary who said some incendiary things that got him in trouble and eventually killed, kind of like Socrates. So who cares? If he died and didn't stay that way, well then now we have to contend with something. Because if he died and didn't stay that way, that means that what he said and what he did has importance and permanence beyond even his life, because he claimed to be, and then proved that he was, the author of life and has power over death. If that happened 2,000 years ago or 5 minutes ago, the fact that it happened, if it did happen, doesn't matter when it happened. It happened. And that's all that's important. The question is whether it did happen. And the question isn't asking for this just now, but the evidence in favor of this fact that he died and rose from the dead, I think is quite powerful, and we can get into that later. So what it has to do with my life today, and our life today, is that there is something about the identity of every human being. It goes back to that idea of the imago Dei, of being made in the image of God, that is secured now by, I think, historically empirical evidence. It's one thing to say you're made in God's image. It's another thing to prove it. Here's how this proves it. Jesus makes the claim that you are made in God's image, reciting what's in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27. He makes that claim. He doesn't say you're an accident. He doesn't say that you're an evolutionary product. He doesn't say any of that. He says you are made specially, wonderfully, and beautifully in God's image. Now, he says you are so valuable as made in God's image, though flawed because of sin, that he's willing to pay the penalty that you and I deserve to pay for the sins that we've committed. And he's willing to pay that by dying in our place because our sins are so severe that they deserve separation from God and death. So he says, I will pay this price for you because you can't afford to pay it yourself. And since Jesus, being God incarnate, doesn't have any sins to pay for his own, he can afford to pay for mine. If it was some sinner who did it, some Jewish carpenter in a forgotten outpost in the middle of the Roman Empire, then yeah, it wouldn't matter. But that's not who he claimed to be. He didn't claim to be this mere Jewish carpenter who was kind of an upstart in the middle of some forgotten outpost of the Roman Empire. He claimed to be God incarnate who could live a perfect life so that he wouldn't have any sins of his own to bear, so that he could be a sacrifice for us and therefore take the penalty that we deserve, thereby satisfying both justice and mercy. Because mercy requires forgiveness, but justice requires punishment, and the cross is the melding of the two things together so that both occur without compromise. And then he rises from the dead to prove that he was right. That when he said he's paying for your sins, you can trust him because he rose from the dead to prove that the cross has no power over him. Why do I believe Jesus and not Muhammad or Confucius or any of the other people? Because those men are all dead and they stayed that way. But Jesus died and rose from the dead. I believe, and I can, hopefully if we want to interact on the evidence for that, we can. He died and rose from the dead. And the guy who rises from the dead has credibility. So when he says that you are made beautifully in God's image, and you can't forget this no matter what century you're living in, even when technology is trying to get you essentially to forget your essential humanness, that historical fact of the resurrection goes 20 centuries into the future to give you an anchor to show that in your deepest, darkest despair, when you think you're nothing more than the random collocation of atoms, the resurrection shows you are far more than that, and that's how it applies to your life today.
Thank you. Thank you. Steve, there's a...
Go ahead. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi.
Oh, that's loud. Hey, my name's Brady.
Hi, Brady.
And my question was just about, you talked a lot about relation and relation with God when you were talking about Genesis 1:27 there.
Yeah.
So my question is, what would you say it looks like or feels like, or what does it mean? However, I don't know how you want to take that, but what does it mean, I guess, to be in a relationship with God? Personally?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what I would say is that what I want to be careful about is I don't want to overemphasize one aspect of this, nor de-emphasize this aspect, because I think oftentimes in our sense of wanting a relationship, we create hyper-emotionalism about faith. And so it becomes this thing where it's this personal relationship, and I believe in that, by the way, but we create this personal relationship with Jesus and, with God, and God downloads things to us, and he tells us things, and he guides us in our lives, and that's great. I have no problem with that in principle. However, I think sometimes we take this idea of a relationship with God, and we divorce it from what I think are objective reasons to understand what God's will actually is. So I think a relationship with God is two parts. And it's really two parts that start to manifest themselves differently in every single person's life. So when the Apostle Paul says that if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Now, what happens after that salvation is a process called sanctification. You're not going to be perfect. You're going to sin again, and you're going to continue to sin. but there's a conviction. The Holy Spirit comes into your life and convinces you of that which is good and compels you, not compels you, but guides you towards that which is more and more Christ-like. You look more and more like Jesus, okay? You look more and more like Jesus, and the Holy Spirit gives you that. But he also is in your life. That relationship you have with the Holy Spirit is a matter of guiding you into all truth. And he steers you so that you see the things that you have shortcomings in and the sins you perpetually do. And so can steer you away from those things, or at least convince you that you're doing things that are outside of the morality that you claim to espouse. And so that relationship isn't just like, I got a buddy who I sit and watch movies with. You know, there's actually a guiding, there's an admonishing. It's a real relationship in that sense because of the sort of inner witness of the Holy Spirit. But the other part of it is not just you believe that he rose from the dead, but you also confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, which means you have to follow what he says. You have to follow his example. To have a relationship with God is to actually take him seriously. And so there's a lot, Dallas Willard once said, there's a whole lot of people who are vampire Christians. They just want Jesus for his blood. They don't want to make him Lord. And making him Lord is way harder than saying he's Lord. That relationship entails obedience to God and his will. I think it entails regular Bible reading. I think it entails compassion. I think it entails looking more and more like Jesus, who makes the golden rule which says that do unto others as you would have them do unto you, in sharp distinction to the other versions of the golden rule of other worldviews, which basically say, do good things and good things will happen. Don't do bad things and bad things won't happen. The first one is self-seeking. Do good things and you'll get good things. The second one is self-defensive. Don't do bad things and bad things won't happen to you. Jesus doesn't say that. He says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In other words, do good things to people even if they don't do good things for you. One is self-protective, one is self-seeking. Jesus is self-sacrificial. And so what I would say then is that that image of God, that imago Dei, we say, what is the image of God? What is the image of God? The Bible literally tells us. Jesus is the image of the invisible God and the very representation of his radiance. So you want to know what it's like to be in communion with God and see what it looks like for you to bear God's image? Look to his example and try to follow it as much as you can during the sanctification process, and look to his example over and over again in prayer, in Bible reading, and obedience to what he has to say, and ultimately in compassion to your fellow human beings. Because as he says, the greatest commandments are love the Lord your God and love other people. And that's what it means to have a relationship with God, I believe, in the most sort of basic sense. And then your individual expression of it, that's a different matter. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure, absolutely.
All right. You guys are doing very well. And I really do want to invite people up to the mic. And we got a great flow of questions here. So over to Ben, then I'm going to do another question that got a lot of votes as well.
Hi, Abdu. My name's Luke.
Hi,
I
Luke.
asked you a question like 2 years ago. We missed it last year.
Oh, what? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, it's nice to see you again, too. I was just wondering, so I've thought about this question, or like I've wrestled with this quite a bit of, in the Old Testament, you were allowed to have multiple wives. And like the most common answer I've got is that God wasn't really okay with it, but he allowed it. And I've never really been satisfied with that answer. And I find myself like even having conversations with coworkers, I'm like kind of scared for somebody to bring that topic up because I just don't have an answer that I'm okay with. Like I couldn't confidently tell someone that, well, God just said it was okay and he allowed it because we were going to sin anyways. Because I don't see a lot of other examples where that's okay anymore, where it's like, well, we're going to sin anyways, so God's going to like control it and make it the best that he can.
Yeah. Thanks, Luke, for the question. I appreciate it. It's a good one. A couple of things I want to say about the way in which you framed the answer that other people have given you, and I think we can provide some nuance that I hope will be at least a little more satisfactory to you. Okay? We'll figure it out. We'll find out. Maybe it won't. I don't think it's the case that in the Old Testament, God clearly doesn't command multiple wives. He clearly doesn't command that. Clearly he doesn't. All the way into Genesis, chapter 1. We keep referring to that, and of course Jesus repeats the whole thing in Matthew chapter 19, where he says, don't you know that in the beginning he created them, male and female did he create them? In his image did he create them? Okay, so we already have two, male and female, so we understand how marriage is going to work. And then he says, And for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife. One. And how many shall become one flesh? Just two. Not 3, not 19, 2. Become one flesh. A unified flesh. That echad, as the Hebrew says, that unification of diversity. There. Jesus repeats it as well. So we already see how marriage is defined. This is exactly what marriage is defined as. So God never actually allows, in the sense that he condones or turns a blind eye towards yours, like, I kind of rather you wouldn't, but since you have a bunch of wives, I'm cool. He doesn't do that. You won't find one place in the Old Testament where God's like, I'm going to bless that marriage and that other marriage you have. What you have, however, is not that God allows it. In fact, what you see, sorry, this thing's a little bit funky on my ears. What you see in the Old Testament is that whenever there are more than, there's polygamy going on, every single time, there's negative consequences, very bad consequences. Consequences that result from God's judgment or the consequences of an immoral act. So God allows immoral acts to happen all the time. I mean, the Bible's lousy with immoral acts, and he allows them to happen, but he does punish them as well. So in this particular instance, you don't have God saying, okay, David, you got a lot of wives, it's cool, don't worry. Solomon, you got a lot of wives, it's cool. Abraham, you got more than one wife, I'm okay with it actually. Now God, despite our evil and our evil intentions and our evil acts, can often bring about blessings despite our blunders. I mean, the story of Joseph is all about that. Joseph is sold into slavery, and he goes to Egypt, and he's put into prison for a thing he didn't even do. And then he gets out of prison, and he ends up becoming such an important figure that he saves not only Egypt, but also Israel, including the brothers who sold him into slavery, from dying from famine. And he says, what you meant for evil, God intended for good. So it's not that it's not evil, it's that God can actually, because he loves us, work through our evil, even for our own benefit, despite our best efforts to screw ourselves up. So all of the marriages in the Bible that are of multiple wives, they work out badly. There's always negative consequences. And the sad part is, it has generational consequences as well. The generations are not judged for the sins of their fathers, but the consequences of sin. Sin has a blast radius, and polygamy is a sin that has a tremendous blast radius, including the death of children, including the betrayal of people's family members, and entire households that go awry. Solomon didn't finish well. As wise as Solomon was, he couldn't tame his own passions. He had multiple wives, and he finished very, very poorly because he imbibed in those passions and felt licensed to do what he wanted to do. So God doesn't allow it in the sense that he's kind of okay with it, is that this evil exists, he's not cool with it, and there are consequences, and he allows those consequences to take root and show us that this is not the way. So whenever you read about the multiple marriages in the Old Testament, you'll see some pretty terrible things that happen as a result, every single time. I hope that's helpful. You've got to work through it more, but I think that's, so he doesn't say, go ahead. He says, don't. And then they do anyway, and bad stuff happens.
Yeah, I like that answer quite a bit. I'm just thinking about, like, even David, like, when he has his whole affair with Bathsheba, it was, like, extreme downfall, extreme blatant punishment, and he was, like, obviously reprimanded straight from God by a prophet.
Yeah.
But that never happens clearly to him in other situations. And, like, even in my own life, I'm like, when I'm walking in sin, it's hard. Like, God's definitely used me even in my weakness, but I find it's more difficult for God to use me or for me to go out and do good works because I'm walking in sin. And like, time and time again, it's these, like, prominent figures like Moses who are being used by God, and they're walking in sin basically by having multiple wives. And it's not like blatantly commanded, like, Moses, get rid of your wives. David, get rid of your wives.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of thinking.
Well, even David wasn't told to get rid of your wife, because now this woman's dependent upon him, and it'd be a total travesty to her. So he's got to take care of her now, but there's going to be consequences, negative consequences for this whole thing, and David repented. One thing that's important to keep in mind, Luke, is that the Bible doesn't record every single solitary thing God ever did with everybody. It's already a long book. It's already long enough. It's not, so we're going to see some things that God doesn't say to people, within the scriptures as well, but you'll notice the negative consequences of these things. He says a whole lot of things, and he doesn't say a whole lot of things, and you can infer the negative consequences based on the actions that are made, even though God doesn't necessarily explicitly say, because of this, this is happening. Mm-hmm. But you can see it throughout the narratives that are happening as well. So yeah, you won't see an explicit sense of that, but you will see the consequences from that whole marriage thing. But there are people who are gifted, who were beloved by God, who were loved, and their actions had consequences. Moses was kept from the promised land. Abraham lived in the sort of negative consequences of his actions. David, of course, couldn't build the temple. He was prevented from building the temple because he was a man of blood. So even those who God loves, he reproves and says, I can't just be okay with this. I have to set an example here. With David, it's overt on the marriage issue because of the way he went about his polygamy. It wasn't even he married Bathsheba. I mean, he abused the situation pretty terribly and got a guy killed. Yeah. So that was even more like egregious because it wasn't just sex outside of marriage. It was terribly done in a way that hurt everybody. So that's why I think you see a stark statement about that as a man who was king. Everybody else was in different positions. So I think that there's a little bit of nuance there. But, the reality is that the marriages don't have good consequences. And why didn't God tell us outright with Moses and Abraham and all these other folks? We can ask them when we get there.
I agree. That's a good,
Thank you.
I'll stick with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Now, I'm going to bring the next question up, if that's okay, because somewhat relates to that. And I am the timekeeper tonight, so I am watching the clock. And I think we're going to wrap up in about just over 15 minutes or so. So I'm just watching.
I'm going to do the speed round, okay, with you
speed
guys.
round. But here's the question, because it relates to marriage.
But please keep asking.
Yeah. And so this is good to sort of, I got to get my question in, so this is the time to get to the mic. But this relates to the question of marriage and what is marriage. And the question is, a lot of people voted for it, and it will be, I think it's worth asking, what is the modern day Christian take, I guess maybe biblical take on homosexuality, and is there a place for someone who's LGBTQ in Christianity? So I think I'm only connecting it to the, hey, what's marriage about? Polygamy, but now we go to relate.
Yeah, this is the question on sexuality. Man, this thing's making me nervous. So let me answer the second part first. Okay. Is there a place in the LGBTQ community or someone from that community in Christianity? I think the answer is I would slightly change the way, the terminology in the sense that I would say there's a place for everyone in the church. You're welcome no matter what it is you say, think, do, or believe, because I, as someone who has plenty of things that I need to work on, I don't need to become clean of everything the Bible says I'm dirty of to walk into a church. That's why I'm walking into the church, is because I want to find community, and I want to find that sense of redemption. I want to find that sense of working things out and belonging in that way. So I think it's often a misnomer that we have to have everything, all of our ducks in a row biblically before we can come to Jesus. I think that's not true. He fixes that stuff as we go. That's the first thing. Second thing is this, though, because we need to have a welcoming sense. Let me say this. I think the words homosexuality and heterosexuality and bisexuality and all these other terms are incredibly unhelpful. Homosexuality and heterosexuality, incredibly unhelpful, because what they start to create is moral categories of distinction based on our sexual behavior, as opposed to just who we are as human beings. So the church, for example, looks at someone who's heterosexual and thinks that's sexually moral. I know plenty of heterosexuals who would not qualify for the category of sexually moral. It might be sexually quote-unquote normal, but it's not sexually moral all by itself. So then we have this category of heterosexual, these people are sexually moral. Here's homosexuals, these are sexually immoral people, and so the church stops reaching out and starts reaching down. Now, the reason why that's an issue for me as a Christian is because as a Christian, I believe that Jesus is my Savior. What do I need a Savior for other than the fact that I'm a sinner? And that I have plenty of things that would disqualify me from heaven. So how dare I look at another human being who's equally a sinner as I am in every single way and say, you, however, sir, or madam, or whatever it is, you are far worse than me. And I get to judge you for it. As a Christian, I have no right to do such a thing. I can judge actions, I can judge behavior, but ultimately, I can't say, Jesus doesn't love you. No way. It's not incumbent upon me to say that. I dare not say it. I have no authority to say it. However, let me say this, okay, about sexuality. I think it's important for us to understand, if you want to reject what the Bible has to say about sexuality, that's okay, but I want to give you what I believe to be the authentic biblical position on this. And if you want to reject that, great. Reject the real thing. Don't reject the caricature of it. So here's what's important. It's important for us to understand not only what the Bible says, but why it says it. Why does it say it? So I remember I was asked this question by a girl at a public university, came to the microphone asking, clearly she was asking about herself. And I was extremely nervous to answer the question because one, it's an incendiary one, and two, the chance for hurting someone is so high. I want to make sure I don't, because start off with this. And that is this, is that I believe that every single human being, no matter what they say, think, do, act like, or believe about themselves or the world, is made in God's image, which means that from my belief and from the Christian perspective, everyone has inestimable worth and value on an objective basis. They are not incidentally sacred because some human being thinks they're sacred. They are objectively sacred because the creator of everything labels them as sacred. And as the objective source of all reality, you can't get more objective than than God saying, you bear my image and therefore you're infinitely valuable. So that means that every single human being is of infinite and inestimable worth and value and sacred. And they are the product of a process. Sex is the way we make more human beings. And if the product is sacred, then the process that brings about a sacred human being itself has to be sacred. If the product is sacred, then the process has to be sacred. And if the process can be what you want it to be based on feelings, whether romantic or lust or whatever it might be, that process starts to lose its sacredness when it becomes malleable to the point of not resembling the original. It loses that sense of the sacred. And so God wants us to understand that sex is this sacred thing because it is the mechanism by which we produce other human beings. Now, that doesn't mean that sex is limited to procreation within the bonds of marriage. No. The Bible is pretty clear. Sex is to happen within the bonds of marriage between one man and one woman, and that's that. It's pretty clear. But why it says it is because the product of sex is sacred, every human being, and so the process has to be protected. Otherwise, it has no boundaries, and it loses its sacredness. That's why people who are addicted to porn are constantly chasing more and more exotic pornography. They start off watching heterosexual man-woman pornography, sort of run-of-the-mill vanilla stuff. As far as pornography goes. And then it quickly moves into other things and more exotic forms of sexual expression. And then it moves into things that are a little bit on the weirder side and then even more exotic and maybe even dangerous in some ways. And the reason why that particular addiction results in weirder and weirder or more exotic expressions is because the person who is engaged in watching pornography has lost the sense of the specialness of sex. Sex has this wonderful specialness to it, and when you make it into an image or make it into something that simply serves your base desires, it loses that specialness. And so what you're chasing by looking for the exotic is you're trying to get that sense of novelty back. So it has to stay perpetually novel within the bonds of its sacredness to make a human being. That's one. Number two is marriage between a man and a woman is the unity of diversities. Men and women are physically different, they're emotionally different, they're different in many different ways, and they complement each other in beautiful ways. And you don't believe me? Just get married and find that out. You'll discover that pretty quick. But the Bible says that God made them in his image. Male and female did he create him in their image. In his image did he create them, male and female. It goes at great lengths to make sure you understand that a woman is made in God's image and a man is made in God's image in a unique way. In other words, a woman bears God's image in a way that I do not. And a man bears God's image in a way that a woman does not. So when I'm married with my wife, she brings something to the table of a reflection of the divine into our relationship that I can't bring. And I bring something to the relationship that she can't bring. But together, we have this unity of diversities. That's why the Bible says, and the two shall become one flesh. Remember, that word one in Hebrew does not mean numerically one. What it means is unified. They are an echad. They're a unity of diversities. And so you see this ability to reflect the divine through the gift of marriage, not the necessity of marriage, but the gift of marriage, by the unity of diversities, of people who are different in many different ways. And it's a benefit to us, to both people. Third thing I would say is this, is that the biblical message on sexuality is not just that you get to reflect the divine in this unified diversity way, but because God himself is a unity of diversities, because God himself is one in his essence, one nature, with three personhoods, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. He is a unified diversity. All the way back to the Shema in the Bible. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. That word one, you can say numerically, you can say Yachid in Hebrew. Yachid can mean numerically one. But the word is not Yachid. The word in the Shema, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. The word is Echad. The Lord is unified. And that's the same exact word that's used of marriage. And so marriage within the bond of one woman and one man, and sexuality expressed that way, is about the sacredness of the person, about the reflection of the unity of diversity of the divine in a way that actually reflects the divine nature of the Trinity. And it is a picture of a marriage that is to come when the unity of diversity of a corrupt bride, meaning the church, is now cleaned up and redeemed and marries the incorruptible and infinite God. That's how the Bible ends. So marriage is about protecting that. It's not about prohibiting certain conduct that dusty old men found icky and used God to justify their prejudice. It's about the protection of something sacred. And that is every single human being, regardless of their desires, regardless of that. Anything that moves you away from that, the reason why it's sin is not just because it's arbitrarily bad. It's because it moves you away from the purpose you were created, which was to bear God's image. And that is a gift to you and me. And anything that diminishes that is something God wants desperately for you not to experience. He desperately wants you to experience what he has for you. That's what I would say the biblical ethic on sexuality actually is. Like I said, you can say, that's hooey, I'm done. Or we can wrestle with this a little bit more and submit our desires to the one who loves us so much that he's willing to give his only begotten Son for you and for me, so that no matter what our sins, and mine are many, that we can have communion with him once again.
Okay, thank you. And we're going to go to a lightning round. We're going to go to this fellow right here by Steve. And go ahead, introduce yourself, and then we're going to go to the lightning round. Go ahead.
My name is Sam. I come from All Nations Church.
Uh-huh.
I'll make two statements and I would want you to respond to them.
Okay.
In the modern day, especially in academia, the student is always becoming better than the teacher. In our discussion today, to me, AI is the student, we are the teachers. If we try to wrestle with AI, there's no way we are going to beat it in terms of intelligence. Maybe emotions we can. And so, according to me, what we need to do is to embrace AI and try to make our lives more efficient instead of fighting it. But in terms of Christianity, and that is my second statement, I feel if you support football, it doesn't matter how good your team is, as long as the players are seated on the bench, there's no way you're going to win. Yeah. Us, as the players who are defending Christianity, I've been in Christianity for a while, but we have kind of taken a back seat, and we have allowed the question about AI to take precedence to a point that today when our kids are being born, they are learning more about AI before we even teach them about God. And that's why they'll feel like, why do you even need God? And I can rush to the phone and give me answers to the questions that I have. And that's why you find that AI is winning 1-0 at the moment, because we have decided to down our tools. If we are to win the war as Christians, so that we don't continue closing churches and opening, let's say, like schools every day, we need to wake up and take up the mantle. And the mantle is us speaking to our children or even the people who don't know about Christianity early enough. Today, the hall might be almost full because people want to hear about AI. Yeah. But if you told them to come today for a sermon, maybe you'd have heard quarter this. And that explains the point, are we losing taste in Christianity or are we finding flavor in AI? So if today I told you when you go home, I'll teach you how AI will make food for you, you'll be very keen to listen. But if I tell you, let's close our eyes and then believe that when you get home, you'll find food on the table because God has brought it, you'll be like, you are joking. Because we tend to believe more that AI is more powerful, and we are losing that knowledge that God supersedes it all.
So let me, by the way, great insights on a lot of that. I appreciate that. Let me just lightning round a couple of responses.
Lightning round coming.
Yeah, so the first thing is, on the first point, I think it's incredibly important that we don't fight it, we use it to make our lives more efficient. Absolutely, 100%. And one of the things I hope is clear from my own views on this is that the problem is not the silicon of AI, it's the soul of the human being. It's not what it is, it's what we will do with it. And one of the things we're doing with it is we're ceding our creativity. We're giving up our creativity. We're giving up our freedom of choice to something because we want it to do stuff for us because we are path of least resistance creatures. So that's one thing, is that we have to absolutely use it. Use it for the benefit of humanity and love God and love people through the gift of technology and through the gift of our rational mind to make technology in the first place. 100%. We got to be in there. We got to do it. We also have to, I think, talk about and get in the game to talk about not just what artificial intelligence actually is, as fascinating it's become. The reason why I think it's more fascinating for lots of people goes back to Jason Allen's comment about AI won, humans lost. And he's boasting about the fact that human beings lost because he's saying we didn't really lose. We made our own God. And not even God can do that. And we beat him. And that's why we're so enamored with it, which is the Adam and Eve story all over again. So the Bible predicted exactly what we're talking about right now, thousands of years ago, before we even thought of this kind of stuff, because this is part of the human condition. So we need to talk about, I think, the veracity of the Bible, the way the Bible actually talks about the human condition in these unprecedented ways, and these sort of eerily interesting and eternally contemporary ways, and help our young people to understand this, because they are becoming more anxious, they are becoming more isolated and more losing their sense of what it means to be human, made in God's image, because they're relying on the technology as well. I say all that, but I also say this, because when you read the statistics that are out there right now, and it's actually quite encouraging, Bible sales are going up by 22 to 25% amongst people 25 years and younger across the West. It's pretty interesting. I think young people have engaged in the post-truth bender and are now in the AI hangover and are like, this isn't satisfying me at all.
Okay.
And I don't need more of the hair of the dog. I need something that gives me true transcendence, because you download your mind into a machine. It doesn't matter how sophisticated that machine is. If entropy still applies to the universe, and it will all grind down to a heat death, and that system of computer will still die. But if you attach yourself and have that sense of communication with the transcendent source of all of existence, nothing ever will decay. No matter how much technology is out there, it's still nothing compared to the one who made technology possible. So I think you're right, we have to make sure of that. But the problem is not the silicon, it's the soul. And we have to make sure, if we root ourselves, I think, in a Christian ethic about what it means to be human, I think we can ride the storm.
Very
Thank
good.
you so much for your comment.
Very good.
Thank you.
Now we are going to go quickly. Thank you very much for those questions. There are so many good questions here. We're going to go to Ben, and then I'm going to kind of land with a couple of questions. Is that okay?
Yeah, so
Ben?
can we finish those two guys?
Yeah, well,
I've been here right from the beginning, but I just recently had surgery. I can't stand for too long.
okay,
So
well,
I've been sitting down.
Okay, I definitely want to get to this guy.
let's go to this fellow right here. You want to
Yeah,
ask that?
come on now.
question?
Yeah,
Yeah,
come on
you
now.
want to give
We'll get to you, I
a
promise.
chance to ask a question, for sure, my
Definitely,
friend.
Professor Murray, I'll speak a little louder on this one. Yeah, apologize. Recently just went through some surgery.
I'm sorry to hear that. Hope you're doing okay.
Oh, I'm doing okay.
Okay.
This is the least of my worry. I had to learn to walk and read at a previous time in my life all over again.
Oh my.
It was a stroke, but anyways. I had the privilege of studying at the University of Toronto Biblical Studies for 4 years under Professor Nagel and Graham back in the 80s. And their area of professional sort of inquiry was in the non-biblical scriptures, the pseudepigraphgy.
Yeah.
Sorry, I catch my breath here. Sorry, folks.
That's okay.
Whoa. Going on about AI, one of the things that always impressed me has been the fact that it does open up a new tool to start the translation of the enormous library of untranslated works.
Yeah.
Particularly I'm sorry, everybody. I get these quivers sometimes, and they can make my voice a little.
We got a guy right
Actually,
there.
do you
for
mind
you.
if I sit down?
Yeah, why don't you sit down and we'll give you the mic. Yeah. Hold the mic for him.
There we go.
Thanks, Steve.
Take a deep breath. You know what the doctor says. One of the things that I do find quite remarkable is this potential for AI to open up a further understanding of the scriptorial record of human history.
Sure.
I mean, the Library of Ashurbanipal represents 32,000 yet untranslated in a language like Sumerian, which has no, a language isolate that no other language is related to.
Yeah.
What kind of secrets? Because part of my study was the pseudepigraphy. And, it was an eye-opener for me to realize that there's an awful lot of Christian scripture that was never officially included within the Bible's narrative.
Okay.
Now, one can argue that some of these books are a little weird, written by somebody who might have, been inviting in something. But there are books, like the book of Thomas, the book of Philip, the book of, the Gospel of, I guess you'd properly refer to.
Yeah, whether it's a gospel or not is another issue, but yeah, it's
So
called that.
my question is twofold. With AI as a tool that can make a difference in understanding this, the potential is that AI's translation into some of these from these obscure languages can open up a whole new interpretation of the Christian faith.
Okay. Yeah, I think that what I would say in response to that is, on a conceptual level, this is why I'm excited about artificial intelligence in lots of ways, because it helps us to actually look at things that we wouldn't even have time to get to necessarily, as long as we're still involved in the process. And there's a lot of studies will show that when there's active human and AI cooperation in a project, human beings actually flourish quite well in that kind of milieu. The problem is that we tend to actually do that, and then we start to diminish our role more and more and let AI do a lot of the laboring or for us, and then we start to lose our capacities. Like the fact that we have calculators doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing our times tables in elementary school, right? Exactly. Because there's a brain development that happens. I think in the scholarly areas too, we need to make sure we understand how translation works and figure out the ways and not just let AI do it for us so that we don't know how to crack the code of some of these ancient texts. Will it lead to new interpretations of ancient history and Christianity? I will leave that to sort of the realm of speculation on this. Given the current scholarship, as I understand it, on ancient scripts and these kind of things, I think what'll happen, and what I've seen, this is based on a trend. This is not based on 100% of the data, and I'm not going to predict anything because, prediction is really hard, especially about the future. I will say that the trend I see, as I understand the endeavor to understand ancient Near Eastern manuscripts, is that what we're getting is a more solid picture of a traditional understanding of what the Bible actually means. We're getting a more solid picture, not a less solid picture. Now, some things are elucidating. It's like, ooh, that's interesting, that's cool. But what we're seeing is more archaeological and more documentary evidence that I think that some of these so-called gospels aren't really gospels at all. Not only are they weird, but they're really late, and we're seeing some of that stuff. So the trend is going towards, I think, a more traditional perspective on Christian understanding of the ancient Near East. But AI as a tool to help us understand, I'm always a big fan of more information, not less. And so if AI can help us on that, I think that's great. I'm going to have to cut it off there only because I want to get to him. Yep. And one more question. Maybe we can talk afterwards more. So yeah.
5 seconds. I would primarily agree with you. I would probably differ that we're not that far ahead.
Yeah.
I think we still got a ways to go.
Oh, we got a huge way. I'm with you on that.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to hold off on this question right over here. for 2 seconds.
Okay.
All right, I'll tell you, I have sort of, because I want to respect the time, and I want to use the about 7 or 8 minutes we have left. So hold on to that question for a second. There are 2 questions, but here's one that many people ask. And I think the question is, why are there so many religions? And part of that is, what makes Jesus Christ unique amongst all these religions?
Yeah.
I think that's where the question is coming from.
Okay.
Back to you.
So I'll give this one the lightning round treatment as well. That's a huge
Sorry,
question
but that was
that
really-
books can be written about and have been written about as well. One thing I would recommend looking at is a book that's it's not a sectarian book, it's not a Christian book. It's written by a scholar called Stephen Prothero out of Boston University, where his book is called God Is Not One, and he goes through the different histories and the different doctrines of the different world religions, the main world religions. And he talks about the differences there as well, because they're not the same. They look superficially similar, but they're fundamentally different. And I think the question actually, as you've worded it, sort of assumes that. I think a couple of things. Some of this is speculation, of course, because I wasn't there when some of these things were actually invented or came to the fore or whatever it is. I think there are social and cultural phenomenon that result in some of the ways in which religion is expressed. I think there are political phenomenon that influence all that stuff. I would never say that that's not the case. What I would say, though, is that religion essentially is man's grasp, humanity's grasp, better put, is that it's humanity's grasp to understand the world around them, their attempt to grasp the world around them, and questions of meaning, of purpose, and destiny. And so it wouldn't surprise me that we have 95% of the world, it's often estimated, believes in something transcendent. Okay, we believe in something transcendent. So it's our attempt to grasp that sense of the transcendent. And we have various forms of it. Stephen Prothero puts it this way: all the world religions start with the same starting line. Something is wrong with the world and something's wrong with us. But then they have different finishing lines. Some of those lines go off a cliff. I believe only one goes up the mountain. And the reason I say that is twofold. The first reason is that I do think that Jesus is unique in an interesting way. When you look at the Muslim will say Jesus is a prophet, born of a virgin, worked miracles by God's permission, and did amazing things, and preached a message. And he was wonderful, and they revere him as one of the chief prophets. They revere him and love him. The Hindu would even say that Jesus is perhaps even an incarnation of Vishnu, that somehow there's an enlightenment to Jesus that we ought to follow. Mahatma Gandhi actually said, I like their Christ, I'm not a big fan of their Christian. So there's an affinity for Jesus there. The Buddhists will tell you that Jesus is like bodhisattva. He's like one of the bodhisattvas that is an enlightened form almost to the point of being the Buddha himself. Even a lot of secular people will tell you, not all of them, but a lot of secular people will tell you, Jesus was a radical revolutionary who upended an evil system that did this and did that, and he sort of said, look, we're going to upend this whole thing, and he got killed for it. So he's a good moral teacher or a radical revolutionary that we can respect. I want you to notice something. The different worldviews out there, at least to some degree, and in fact to a large degree, they have this affinity for Jesus. Like that show, Everybody Loves Raymond. Everybody loves Jesus for some reason. He seems to be the sun around which so many worldviews orbit. He really does seem to be that. They don't orbit around other figures. You don't see a lot of dyed-in-the-wool Christians having an affinity for Confucius. They might appreciate some of his teaching and some of the wisdom in some of his teaching, but they're not going to say, Confucius is my man. They're not going to do that. You're not going to see a lot of Hindus who are saying, Muhammad's my guy. You're not going to see that. But for whatever reason, Jesus has this attractional, gravitational pull of people from various religious systems. But what they do, to quote Samuel Zwemer, is that they sort of do what Judas did. They betray the Son of Man with a kiss, because they kiss him and say, Hail, Rabbi, but they rob him of his cross. What makes Jesus unique, I think makes Jesus unique, is that every other system of belief, to some degree or another, and I want to make sure I qualify that, to some degree or another, says that humanity has a problem, and there is a need for some kind of a redemption of some kind. And at some point, there's either a works-based system where we do enough good things and we can prove our worth to God or the gods or realize our inner divinity and become God himself or whatever it might be. There's that sense in which we are the problem, but we are also at least the participants in our own solution. Every single worldview has some level of that. And I know there's differences and there's some nuances, like with Islam, for example. God's mercy is a huge part of it, but you have to earn that to some degree as well. So I think that's a big part of why those religions, as different as they are, have that same sense of commonality, is that there is a problem with you, but if you work hard enough and you try to please God or become God or whatever it is, you can be your own solution. The Christian message is that you are the problem, therefore you can't be the solution. And if you can't be the solution, you need someone who's not you to save you from you. What makes the Christian message unique is that Jesus makes an empirically falsifiable claim. He says that I will die on a cross, I will be put in a tomb, and I will rise from that tomb to prove I am who I said I am and that I am the sole means of your salvation. It's either true or it's false, and opinion is not relevant. And so he makes that statement, and then I believe, historically speaking, he does that thing. And every single worldview that denies the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus has to be categorically wrong because of this, I think, central fact. But what makes the Christian message unique is that where other worldviews have you trying to reach up to God in some way, Christianity recognizes that for all of our reaching, we fall short, and he reaches down. What that means to me is that there is an exclusive means of salvation. But John 3:16 says something interesting. He says, "For God so loved the world," that's everyone, "that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever shall believe in him," that's anyone, "will not perish but have everlasting life." It is the exclusive means of salvation, but it is given with an inclusive invitation. And I think that's what makes Christianity inherently unique.
Okay. I have one last question, but I'm going to hold.
You're coming.
We're going to go to this mic here, and then I'm going to ask that last
All right.
question. Yeah.
Let's hear it.
So I don't know if this question is a little too big for the...
Say it again, I'm sorry.
I don't know if this question is a little too big for the amount of time we have, but if I were to condense my question, the illusion of choice is not a choice at all. And so if both God being all-knowing and us having free will are both true statements, how do they fit together?
Yeah. Very good. I appreciate that. Yeah, that's definitely a big question, isn't it? What's your name again? Mark? Nice to meet you, Mark. Thank you for the question. I've wrestled with this one quite a bit myself, and I still continue to wrestle with it to a degree because I think there is something of a mystery in this. I think there is something of a mystery. So a couple of things I'll say. I don't know if my mic's working exactly. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Awesome. Classically speaking, within the pale of Christian understanding of God, is that God is sovereign. But that sovereignty has two expressions, in his directive will and his permissive will. So God can direct certain things to happen, like the parting of the Red Sea, like the virgin birth, like the resurrection of Jesus, and he can permit certain things to happen, whether it's a good deed someone does, or he allows someone to do something terrible, or he allows a natural disaster, whatever it might be. He can allow, flowers to bloom as they normally do, and he doesn't have to intervene every single time. He creates the process and allows it to happen. So you have a directive will and you have a permissive will, okay? And part of that permissive will, I should say this, part of that directive will is that God directs a world where there are actually rational free creatures who can decide things. We can legitimately decide things of our own free will. So he directs that that's the way the world works. He allows and permits us to have success and to have horrible failures. So he permits that within the bounds, I should say, of our free will. Now, there's another way in which God actually understands the world. I believe it's called middle knowledge. I'm a pretty big fan of middle knowledge, and the idea of middle knowledge is that God not only knows what you will do, but God knows what you would do freely in certain circumstances, okay? So he creates certain circumstances knowing you'll freely choose that thing of your own free will under those particular circumstances. So it's not an illusion of free will. He simply creates the circumstances where you will freely choose this particular thing because he knows you better than you know yourself. And so that's middle knowledge. He knows a counterfactual. He knows that the world will be this way if you do this thing. And if you don't do this thing, he knows what will happen then too. And so through either his directive will, he can change circumstances so that you'll freely choose something, or for his permissive will, he'll let you do it without interfering at all. So this is a way in which I think that human free will and divine foreknowledge and divine sovereignty can actually engage with each other. Just because God knows something's going to happen doesn't mean he makes that thing happen. Like when we decided to have kids, I knew that absent the return of Jesus, my kids are going to get sick, going to get hurt, and I'm going to die one day. I knew that when we decided to have children. I didn't kill them. My foreknowledge doesn't mean that I caused their deaths in that sense. So, and they haven't died, by the way, so don't. So I think that's part of the baseline understanding. But how this works out, there was a thought experiment that I remember going through on the idea that that God can intervene sovereignly in our lives, yet we remain having free choice, not an illusion of choice, but an actual choice, okay? So let's say you and I are roommates, okay? And let's say you're preparing for a marathon, and you're out there and you're training and you're running, and you need to cut weight because, getting lighter will help you run your 26 miles much better than having a few extra pounds. And you're cutting carbs, okay? I'm not doing any of that stuff. I'm just watching television all day. Now, you come in from a run, and you've been disciplined in your dieting, and you are not eating carbs so you can cut weight fast enough for this thing to come up. So you're doing your thing. And you happen to know that last night I went out to a restaurant and I got one of those ridiculous chocolate cakes that's like 9 feet high, like those death by chocolate deals, and it's in the refrigerator. It's sitting there in the refrigerator. And I'm not going to eat that thing. And I know you've got a raging sweet tooth. And it's going to be very hard for you to resist eating the chocolate cake when you walk in. And I see you, I'm watching my television, and I see you, and you are wrestling with it, and you are thinking about it, and you're like, okay, I ran, I've been doing great, I deserve a break today. But I got a big goal, and you're wrestling with this whole thing. Do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I deserve it? Am I going to ruin stuff? I don't know what I'm going to do. Okay, I'll take a shower first, and then I'll decide. So you go and you take your shower, and you get clean, and now you're done, and you're like sitting around, and you know that it's in there and all that, and you're going to ask me, can I have a bite of it? You're going to ask me, can I have a slice of that thing? And I can see you wrestling with it, and thinking, okay, I'm just going to watch this one television program, and then go to bed. If I do that, I'll hold out, and then I won't have it. And then you wrestle for the entire hour of this television program. You're thinking about nothing but that cake. That's what you're thinking about. And then you go to bed, and you don't eat it. Did you freely choose to not eat the cake? Yes. Little did you know, I threw it out an hour ago. You couldn't have eaten it if you wanted to. So in my sovereignty over the cake, I threw it away. In your free will, you freely chose not to eat it anyway. So both things can exist at the same time. So I think that's a helpful illustration. I think God knows what you would do in certain circumstances, and maybe it would be, he's not going to hold out, so I got to get rid of it. Or who knows what it is? But I think that's how these two things can work. But there's going to be an element of mystery to it, because we don't know all the things God knows. So to say that it would be a contradiction for us to have free will and God to be sovereign suggests that we have this ability to crawl inside the mind of the infinite and say, you know all the end from the beginning. But this is a problem, isn't it? I think that we can see that there is an interaction of the two things. So I hope that's helpful. It's a big, heady subject, and we had a short time to talk about it, but I hope that's a little helpful for you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Take care. God bless you.
All right. We are at the end of our evening, and I'm going to do something it's going to take a little liberty here, and I'm going to ask a question.
Okay.
And, last year, Abdu, you were not able to be with us last year because of just a horrendous experience that you went through. Yeah. And some of you, probably many of you weren't there, but a couple of us were there last night, and you were in North Bay at Nipissing and spoke on this question: do evil and tragedy disprove God? And I imagine in an audience this size, there are a lot of people who have gone through some quite heavy matters in their lives, have gone through tragedy, who have suffered too much, who maybe have been on the end of a lot of injustice or evil, etc. And you know that experience. So even I know we're coming to a close here, but I just felt that if I could ask you that question, how are you at one point in your life, a Muslim, now a committed Christian. All that said, how do you work through that question of, hey, all this evil and suffering in the world, all this brokenness, does God even care? Does he enter into any of this? Does he care about me, etc.? Can I turn that over to you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And with this, we'll conclude. So some of you know this, some of you don't. It's a bit of a bomb drop. And I'd say what happened, why I couldn't come last year, is that as I was flying to Dubai, about 2.5 to 3 hours out from landing, I got a series of texts that informed me that while I was flying, 2 men posed as utility workers, conned their way into my parents' home, led my father down into the basement, surprised him, and took his life on October 11th, 2024. They assaulted my mom and for money. I had to fly home and be with the family and try to wade through the tragedy, you know. As someone who does what I do and thinks about the things that I think about and writes about the things that I write about, this issue of suffering and evil comes up all the time. And in some ways, I've been touched by suffering. I've had losses before October 11th, 2024. I've actually had losses since then. It's one thing to talk about it in an academic way, to talk through some of the answers that are out there. And there are plenty of answers that are actually out there. I've talked with other people who've lost people and walked them through the whole idea of loss and suffering. And how can a good and all-powerful God exist in a world where suffering exists? Because if he was good, he would want the suffering to stop. If he was powerful, he'd be able to make the suffering stop. If the suffering hasn't stopped, so either he's not all good or he's not all powerful, or probably he's not even there. That's how the objection goes. You see, that's the so-called problem of evil, as philosophers call it. But when you're touched by it, in the way I was touched by it, and even saying touched by it sounds a little bit sterile and tame. I was rattled and shaken and almost strangled by the problem of evil. It stops becoming a problem, and it starts becoming a scandal. It is scandalous to our experience that a God who is all-powerful and all-loving still allows suffering and evil to exist. And there's plenty of answers. One of those answers, among the many, philosophically speaking, is that God, who knows everything, he knows all past, present, and future, he knows all future possibles and all counterfactuals, he knows all of that stuff. It's possible, definitely possible, that that kind of a God who has that kind of knowledge, if he does exist, could allow, not necessarily cause, but could allow suffering and evil to exist in one particular instance, or many, for a greater possible good that can be worked out because of that suffering and evil. That might happen in 5 minutes, that could happen in 50,000 years. We're just simply not in a position to know that because we don't have infinite knowledge of the future. If you say it's not possible that God could do that, then you have infinite knowledge of the future, and you're using your infinite knowledge of the future to disprove the existence of a being who has infinite knowledge of the future. So we have to be in a position to say, I don't know what that possible good could be, but it's at least possible that there could be a greater good that comes from some instance of suffering. Now, here's the thing. So, that's just a sophisticated way of saying God works in mysterious ways, which is terribly unhelpful. Terribly unhelpful. There's so much more to say about this, so much more to say. But I, as a Christian, have wrestled with this for 13 months. And for years before, intellectually, but now 13 months existentially. How does this answer actually help me? And I keep coming back to a truth, to I think a stark reality, because if there is no God, then these tragedies, while they have meaning in my life, are ultimately objectively meaningless. And the good fortune, as Dawkins would say, is ultimately objectively meaningless. Just, well, I guess that's the way it works. It's a world where there's selfish genes and comet strikes and tectonic plates. You're going to get random acts of death and these kind of things. But I have more than this theory that God can use suffering for a greater possible good, because as a Christian who's really taken the time to study what I believe to be the historical veracity of the resurrection of Jesus, I don't believe simply that God can use suffering for a greater possible good. The crucifixion and resurrection demonstrates to me that God did use his own suffering for the greatest possible good there could ever be, which is the salvation of the entire world. Because his son died and rose from the dead. So I can trust God with my suffering, with my wounds, with all that I'm going through. I can trust what God will do with it because of what God has done with his own. What I've come to understand, friends, if you haven't experienced something like this, I hope you never do. But you're going to experience suffering in this world if you haven't already, and probably you have in tremendous ways. The loss of that person, their absence, is this yawning gulf that never seems to get filled, because they are made eternally and exquisitely valuable, not incidentally, but inherently. And it can be restored. I think it can all be made right through the empirically verifiable, I believe, historical resurrection of Jesus. So I can trust what God will do with my suffering because what God has done with his own. But in the meantime, we walk through this life as wounded people. I will always walk with a limp. Always have an emotional limp thinking about Dad. But I fundamentally believe that only a wounded Savior can satisfy the wounded soul. So I want to offer you today, that's all it is an offer. Take it or leave it. As you think about these things, please interact with the folks here at Laurentian Christian Fellowship. They'd love to talk with you about these deep issues and be community for you if you don't have that community. Find a local church and see what they have to offer. Look into the credibility of the Christian message and see what it has to offer. Don't rely on technology to do your praying for you or to do your searching for you. Engage in the hard work of finding the answers yourself. Maybe even pray if you've never prayed before. And maybe it's the wall, maybe it's the ceiling you're talking to, who knows? I think I know who you're talking to. And ask him, if you're true and you're really there and you care, will you reveal yourself to me? I think he will. Because the last question you asked me, Sam, was, how do I know he cares? I know that my dad is of infinite worth. How do I know how valuable he is? And how valuable I am, or that you are? You know how valuable something is by what you're willing to pay for it. And the creator of the entire universe paid an infinite price to spend eternity with you, and my dad, and me. And I know I have value, and I know you do because of that reality. So I offer this to you. Find some place to ask him, are you really there? I think he'll show himself to you. I know he cares because he paid so much. You have been incredibly patient, incredibly gracious, and incredibly kind. We haven't always agreed on everything as you've been sitting there possibly, but you've honored me. Time is something you're not getting more of, and you gave me some of it today, and I want you to know how precious I find it. Thank you guys. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Abdu. We just want to extend, again, our appreciation for coming here, and to the folks who helped put this evening together. On your way out, maybe you want a Bible, you never had a Bible, the Share Word Global table is there. Many of you were invited out here by friends. Continue the conversation. Some of you are attending Laurentian University. LCF is a great place of contact. And finally, if you want to ask questions on our website, we'd love to connect with you. Thank you very much for coming out. Have a good evening.